In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and for a time it was good. It was prosperous. Things were going well, until they didn't. Which brings us to the flood. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. So what do we know about Atlantis? And who do we know it from? Well, it's Plato. That's it. There's no other source or records on the city of Atlantis. So let's take a look at what Plato had to say about the city of Atlantis, its characteristics, and where it may be in the world. Every version of the Atlantis story, every theory, map, and debate begins with Plato. He didn't claim to make up this story. He said he recorded it. A real account passed down through Egyptian priests to the Athenian lawgiver Solon, or however you pronounce that, Solon. And then finally to Plato himself. So what exactly did Plato say about Atlantis? What details survive in his own words? Plato wrote about Atlantis in two dialogues, around the year 360 BC. Plato used the story to explore themes of morality, pride, civilization, but he gave it real dates, geography, and political detail. He didn't call it a myth. He called it history, retold by the Egyptians. Plato described Atlantis as a vast island kingdom located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Straits of Gibraltar. Beyond those waters lay a great island, larger than Libya and Asia combined. Here's what he said about it. Atlantis formed a series of concentric circles, alternating bands of land and sea that surrounded a central island. Bridges and canals connected each ring. The capital city sat at the center, crowned by a temple. The Atlanteans carved mountains, redirected rivers, and built harbors that glistened with metal. Plato described the land as rich in resources, abundant in everything with timber, elephants, precious metals, ivory. Plato's Atlantis wasn't a primitive world. He called it an advanced maritime power, ruled by 10 kings. Each king governed his own region, but all obeyed laws engraved on a golden pillar inside Poseidon's temple. Their society valued discipline, order, and virtue. Over time, their wealth bred arrogance. The kings grew hungry for conquest and turned their armies against the rest of the known world. Plato wrote that earthquakes and floods struck in a single day and night of misfortune. The island sank beneath the sea, taking its people and their great works with it. After that event, the sea became impassable, choked with mud and debris, the aftershock of a world lost forever.
The Urbano Monte Planisphere world map from 1587. Yes, we're heading back to the Renaissance. When we look at the 1587 map, The Atlas Mountains aren't just a barrier, they are a gateway. And Plato claimed Atlantis was swallowed by mud and water, leaving the area impassable. Historians like Herodotus wrote about an ancient, enigmatic tribe living right here in the shadow of these peaks, the Atarantes and the Atlantes. Herodotus explicitly claimed these mountains took their name directly from Mount Atlas, and their own mythologies speak of ancient, powerful kingdoms that existed before the desert swallowed the green Sahara. When modern internet sleuths look at the Richat structure further south, they see the skeletal remains of a city. But when we look at Urbano Monte's map, we see the peoples and the water waves that survived the cataclysm. The cartographer proves that this region remained a center of mysterious, ancient, geopolitical power long after the world forgot where Atlantis truly sat. For centuries, the location of Atlantis has been a wild goose chase. And most of the people look deep under the water in the Atlantic. Some are looking in the Mediterranean Sea. But what if we are looking in the wrong place entirely? And because we forgot how to read ancient maps, we're looking in the wrong place. See, Plato, he famously wrote that Atlantis sat directly in front of the Pillars of Hercules, which is modern-day Gibraltar. And this area was ruled by Atlas. He was the first king of Atlantis. And right behind those pillars sits the massive Atlas mountain range in northwest Africa.
Is it, in fact, somewhere out here in the Atlantic? Is this what we're seeing here? Is the remnants of what used to be Atlantis? I don't know. I don't think so. If we're following the evidence, where could it possibly be? Well, then I came across this. And the more I zoom in, the clearer it becomes. This is just my line here. Take that off there. The Richat structure. Now, if you look at it, it has the rings. Plato said that there was a mountain range, a significant mountain range. Here is a mountain range. Also says it has large deposits of salt. Well, these white, all that white right there, those are salt deposits. That is evidence that salt water came in, washed over it, had time to evaporate, and the salt was left. Now if you zoom out even more, the evidence of a flood through this area becomes very apparent. You can literally see that's where the water flowed. If you follow that, now whether it came from left or whether it came from the west going east or east going west, well, that's where the waters of the deep broke open, I think. And this is where you would have all the tsunamis. Tidal wave after tidal wave after tidal wave hitting the coast. So it's possible it hit this way, and then it receded back this way. Hit this way, and then it did it several times over. But the evidence is clear. And this is known as Mauritania. That's important. And you'll see why later. This is called the Eye of the Sahara, obviously, because it looks like an eye. The description that was given is it was about 24 kilometers wide. That's 13.1 miles. Kilometers. That's 21 kilometers. That fits.
It is widely known that the ancient Romans were renowned for documenting everything, as the Caesars went to profound extent to accumulate knowledge and information from every location their vast empire ventured. So I have to admit that I was quite surprised to learn of someone by the name of Pomponius Mela, who was the Romans' first geographer dating back to some 2,000 years ago, and had created a sophisticated map of the known world at that time, titled The Habitable World of Pomponius Mela, something that up until recently I had never seen or heard of before. And real quick, let's not confuse this map with the ancient Greek historian Herodotus' map of the known world of 2,500 years ago, which I shared in one of my prior videos on this topic. A map that curiously listed Atlantis in the same location of the Richat. However, the original source of this map is a bit of a mystery, as modern historians claim that Herodotus is not known to have ever created an actual map and have thus put its origins into question. So, putting that map aside, let's focus on this verifiably authentic 2,000-year-old map that has also annotated something very interesting in the Western Sahara Desert. First, notice that this map is oriented to the east in its original form, so let me go ahead and flip it to a north-south facing orientation so we can gain our bearing. And the features of Europe, West Asia, and North Africa become apparent. So let's now focus our attention to what is in the northwest region of the Sahara and observe what it annotates here. Atlantia, or Atlantiae, which more or less appears as Atlanteans, and again, in the same geographical region of the Richat structure, which, like I've shared in my prior videos, just so happens to coincidentally match so many precise details that Plato described of Atlantis, including that the capital city was famously said to be made up of concentric circles, specifically 3 rings of water and 2 of land, which correctly matches the Richat with water in it, which it certainly did, as I will prove to you with hard scientific data in just a moment. But the circular ring city was also said to have an opening to the sea at the south, which not only matches the southerly opening of the Richat anomaly, but it even has existing evidence of a flow of salt water that is still visible to this day, which, and again, I will prove with hard scientific evidence shortly. But Atlantis was also said to be surrounded by a large rectangular plain, which is another arguable similarity that extends for hundreds of miles on both sides of the Richat. But furthermore, Atlantis was said to be made of black, red, and white color stones, which is another specifically unique similarity that matches the geological nature of the Richat. And speaking of uniquely specific geological features, this next detail that I recently learned of blew me away, as there is English literature from the year 1851 on the preliminary treatise of resources of ancient Mauritania, which describes the country as having gold in considerable quantities, and even specifically states, and I quote, that it is a well-authenticated fact that previous to the discovery of America, Europe was supplied to a great extent with gold from Mauritania. How have I never heard of this before? And get this, Mauritania was so rich in gold that several hundred years ago, a king by the name of Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, which was a region of Africa that includes modern-day Mauritania, was said to have been the richest man in all of human history. So rich that he far exceeds the richest billionaires alive today. In fact, he owned gold mines which account for more than half of the world's supply of gold today. And by the way, something else you'll find interesting related to that 1851 treatise of ancient Mauritanian resources is that it describes ancient Mauritania of having an abundance of elephant ivory, which is a significant detail considering that Atlantis was said to have numerous elephants on the island. And so it's worth mentioning that there is also existing cave art depicting elephants in the area around the Richat as well, as I've shared previously. But I digress, because another highly specific feature of Atlantis was that its center island was described as being geothermal in nature, and that it was said to have hot springs as well as springs of cold fresh water, which is a reason why some have dismissed the dry, barren Richat structure as a possibility for Atlantis. So I imagine that many will find it very interesting to learn that there is a little known study of the Richat structure dating back to the late 1990s, which describes the Richat as being a hydrothermal complex. Well, hot springs themselves are the very definition of a hydrothermal anomaly. And the fact that there is an actual scientific study corroborating this uniquely specific characteristic is significant in itself, because although the Richat may be a dry, barren place today, we must imagine what a different landscape this region was some 11 to 12,000 years ago at the time of Atlantis. This is the part in the video where things get crazier and will continue to do so through the rest of the video. Because another key aspect is that Atlantis was described as having impressive mountains to the north. So, assuming that the cliffs of the Adra Highlands don't already meet that description, there is likewise a massive mountain chain to the north called the Atlas Mountains, which were aptly named after the first known king of Mauritania, who, get this, just so happens to share the same exact name of the very first king of Atlantis, who was also named Atlas. Gee, what a coincidence. But it only gets more bizarre from here, because not only was the city of Atlantis described as having mountains located to the north, but also said to have rivers. So get this. Recent scientific studies have confirmed an ancient river called the Tamanrasset that flowed from the Atlas Mountains and winded some 500 kilometers all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, directly in the path of the Eye of the Sahara. And if that isn't fascinating enough, just look at the date of when that river is known to have existed. 11,700 years ago, precisely within the time frame of when Atlantis was said to have been destroyed. Make no mistake, the entire region of the Sahara looked completely different at that time compared to what we see today.
So if I'm being honest, and I was asked, do I believe that Atlantis was a real place and really existed? I don't know. But there certainly is a lot of evidence to suggest that it was real. And if what I am seeing on the maps with the Eye of the Sahara is true, it definitely backs up the story of Noah's flood in the Bible. Now, I obviously disagree with the timeline presented in this, especially by Plato, that this happened 10,000 years ago. I believe it happened during the time of the flood, which was about 4,400 to 4,600 years ago. That's when I think it happened. So is it real? That's for you to decide. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have and you're still here, hit that like and hit that subscribe. I'm still a small channel. It helps me out immensely, and it's completely free of charge. So until next time, we'll be seeing you.